Welcome to another edition of South Center's Chat. I am your host. I work as director at OSU South Centers. We have a special guest for our upcoming program, Dr. Graham Cochran, the Associate Dean for Operations in our College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Graham. Welcome again to our South Center's Chat, and our special guest today is Graham Cochran, the Associate Dean for Operations in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. Graham is no stranger to our college. He works on the Columbus campus, and I think he's actually recording with us this morning from up in Worcester, Ohio. So welcome, Graham.
Tom, good to be with you this morning, and look forward to talking to you about some of the exciting things going on in our college.
Excellent. We are very interested in hearing about the update as well. But before we get into that, Graham, I think that you have some ties down here in southern Ohio, just not very far from here, and maybe you could give us a little bit of your background before we get into the current projects and things that you're leading.
Absolutely. Well, I've worked at Ohio State now for 23 years and had a number of different roles at the university, but really got started on a career path with Ohio State because of my roots in southern Ohio. Grew up on a farm in Jackson, Ohio, between Jackson and Oak Hill, and my involvement with 4-H and camping at Cantor's Cave nearly 40 years ago was what set me on this path. And certainly appreciate spending time in southern Ohio. It's got a special place in my heart. Be there this weekend to spend some time with family. But I'm also appreciative to the opportunities that the university and the university's presence in Jackson County gave me to get me started on a path and a great career with Ohio State.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, appreciate that. And I think it is a special thing to have the opportunity to be part of the university after early experiences. I kind of share some of that with you. Not too far from here, if you way the crow flies, it's not that far from Fayette County to Jackson County, and I think we got those schools in the same league now, or at least as I understand, so a little bit of rivalry going on. But we're here really to talk about the college today, and Graham leads efforts in the college in terms of operations, and operations gets into infrastructure, so we're going to get into that, but we could talk just a little bit about kind of the way you characterize the footprint of the college in Ohio, Graham, and I think you have a way of capturing that that you might want to share.
Sure. Well, the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, we think is unique among colleges at Ohio State in terms of our footprint in Ohio. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll probably get into some of those, but the best way that we've found to describe our presence across the state of Ohio is a focus on 3 campuses. Columbus campus is the one that most people think of first when they think of Ohio State. A Worcester campus where we have a very large presence, and a statewide campus. And for us, a statewide campus means all of our research stations, farms, places like South Centers in Pike County and Stone Lab, which is an island in Lake Erie, and all of our extension offices in each county in Ohio include that statewide campus. It's actually nice to describe, and that we can say about a third and a third and a third in terms of our people and resources that are invested in each of those 3 campuses. So those is a very important part in its own way, and an important part of our investment of people and work with Ohioans.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of background, and we don't want to get too deep into the history, but we are coming up on a mark for the university that is going to come up in a year or so, and maybe you want to talk about that just a little bit, what's coming up next year, Graham?
Yeah, so 150 years in 2020 is a celebration for Ohio State and for our college, and it's a special time for Ohio State and our college. And I'll mention a couple of things just about why that might be interesting for the listeners here. In the late 1800s is a neat time in the U.S. I think it's history is something I'm interested in terms of land grants, and land grant universities like Ohio State were created in the late 1870s to serve and increase the ability of the common man at that time to pursue higher education. So in 1870, Ohio State was founded. 2020 will celebrate 150 years. And College of Agriculture were a cornerstone as a part of founding colleges like Ohio State. At that time, they were A&M or agricultural and mechanical colleges. So a college like ours, as well as a focus on things like engineering and medicine and military sciences, were part of that in 1870, and we're celebrating 150 years. And I think as we talk and more, you'll see that we're just as relevant today as we were 150 years ago, helping address different kinds of problems and issues, but the relevance still continues. And part of what we'll talk about today is how we maintain that relevance.
Absolutely. Well, certainly lots of change in agriculture over those years, and to no small matter, I think it was the presence of land grant universities and the research and education, the outreach, all of those mission areas, and notwithstanding the education of students that have made the transformation in agriculture possible. It's so different if we can really know a little bit of history and stories from the past of what it was like in 1870 to 150 years later. It's a totally different picture, as everything in our life is, but just even looking back, I'm involved in cooperatives, and thinking about the growth and the establishment of many cooperatives in the 1930s. And when you look back and think about how little development there was even in 1930, and then just come forward the last 90 years or so, it's quite remarkable of what has transformed agriculture in America. Well, I appreciate that, and just to kind of move down that funnel just a little bit to get to the topics that we want to talk about, I think it grows out of some grand challenges that our Dean, Kathann Kress, has identified, and I think there are 4 of those you might want to touch on, and I think one of those will lead us into our topic of the day.
Yeah, so I think it's a good connection there. The history of places like Ohio State and colleges like ours, we're helping people and society deal with the challenges of the day. And you've referenced how those have changed since 1870, and we could think about different milestones over the years between now and then. But today, we've framed a set of grand challenges that we think are particularly important for Ohioans and for society that our college is uniquely positioned to help partner with them on addressing. I describe them also as wicked problems. The wicked problems are challenges that aren't going to go away. We're going to keep working at them, and we'll keep working at them for the rest of our lives and beyond. But they're the important challenges of today. So 4 of those that we're framing as a focus for the work of our college include sustainability, One Health, the rural-urban interface, and leadership. Sustainability for us is very broad. So it includes viable agricultural production, food security and safety, environmental and ecosystem sustainability, and doing all that at the same time. A good example today that we're working through in Ohio that relates to many of those is water quality, and water quality in Lake Erie that affects a lot of those issues and relates to sustainability and is a very complex and dynamic problem.
Absolutely. I think having the word grand in there is very appropriate, because when we look back to the early days, maybe one discipline, could figure out how to improve the output from dairy farms and dairy cattle and, crops. There were agronomists that focused strictly on corn, and that was very contributing. But when you get to some of these things that we face today, it takes a multidisciplinary and partnership to address them. That it seems that it's the easy things have been done, and it takes all those, but we have to look and work across disciplines to achieve progress. And so they will take time, and I think we will be working on those things. So facilities and operations fit into that, Graham, and that's your wheelhouse. And so I invite you to kind of share with us really kind of what does that mean when we say operations or facilities or infrastructure. Some of those words get interchanged and are part of each other. You might want to lay that out for us.
Sure. Well, we've identified transforming our college into a modern land grant as part of a priority for us. There's a lot of things that we think we need to do to be successful in accomplishing that goal. It includes our people, our critical asset, and securing talent, working on ways we can improve student engagement, making sure that we're doing a good job of engaging communities broadly defined, which may mean partners in industry, it may be partners in communities in rural and urban areas in Ohio. But one of those, and the focus for our conversation today is about refreshing our infrastructure. Much like our roads in the U.S. are aging, and we've talked about a need to address aging infrastructure in terms of transportation. For our college, infrastructure is important as well, and we haven't attended to it as well as we need to. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and also a lot of technological changes that are affecting need for infrastructure. But I think what I will mention there in terms of your question about what infrastructure means is that when you think of a college, a lot of times people would think about infrastructure meaning a classroom with 4 walls or a lab where students were learning about chemistry or biology. But for us, facilities means a whole bunch of different things. It can be campuses and buildings like I described, but it also can be learning labs that are outside the walls of a classroom. It can be about renovation of a greenhouse. It could be a barn, and just as well, it could be an arboretum, a field, or a woodlot that's part of our infrastructure broadly defined.
It's quite varied and diverse across the state, and there's a lot of land area involved. You might want to mention that. I think you've got some statistics, and I've heard how many different facilities our college has assigned to it, and the acreage and so forth, if you have that data.
Sure. So if we look about our footprint across the 3 campuses that I described earlier, our footprint includes about 11,000 acres, and that includes places that are on those campuses in Columbus and Worcester, other places statewide, and then our land base in terms of research stations and farms. And that land base is very diverse, lots of different kinds of property there. About 800 facilities, if you count things like barns and other outlying buildings. And they range from very small buildings to larger classroom science buildings kinds of things. So about 11,000 acres, about 800 buildings that are part of our portfolio and supporting our teaching, research, and outreach missions.
Plenty to keep the Associate Dean for Operations engaged. I know just what few buildings and number we have here on our small property at South Centers, but it's continuous, whether it's a roof, whether it's windows, whether it's a heating system, it goes on. And everyone that is a homeowner or has to maintain facilities understands that the weather is out there at all times, and it does nothing but bring about the need for maintenance and upgrades and renewal. So it's a big task, and that quickly turns into, well, how do you finance all that? And I think you touched a little bit on partnerships, and we know that those are important as we think about trying to move forward in the area of facilities.
Yes, you're right. So we'll talk in a little bit about some of the numbers, I think, in terms of the dollar amounts of projects that have been recently completed and are underway right now, and it's pretty big. But we're also very purposeful about that. So we need to make sure that priorities, it's important for us to make sure that we have priorities that are driving decisions about where we invest money and resources in facility improvements or buildings. Partnerships are also important that you referenced there. And so partnerships can mean a lot of different things for us. Our elected officials are important partners and at times helping us in very significant ways with providing funding to support facility improvements. It may also be our partners in the private sector, so public-private partnerships that help us leverage public dollars to help us improve facilities. And it can also mean significant investments from donors, individual donors that are passionate about the work that we do. Later on, I think we'll get into an example of one specific donor that's provided a sizable donation that's helped us build one of the buildings we're building now on the Columbus campus. So a wide array of what partners mean for us, and helping us leverage our own dollars in a smart way.
Great. Well, we know it can't be done single-handedly, and it can't always be elected officials are doing all that they can, but everybody's resources are scarce, and I think it's important to put as many sources together as we possibly can, just as you said. So maybe at this point we could get a little bit more specific and talk about some of the recently completed or ongoing projects, Graham, that you want to highlight.
Absolutely. Well, high-level numbers, I will mention that we have a list of projects that were completed since 2017. So about the time that Dean Kress arrived with us at Ohio State to now, we have about $15 million worth of projects that were completed. And those range from very small projects to much larger projects. In that list, about the largest project were some renovations that were completed in several buildings on the Columbus campus to improve laboratory spaces and classroom spaces. And then a wide range of things that include greenhouse work. I'll give a couple examples of some of those that were completed recently to illustrate. One that's in southern part of Ohio, but on the other side of the state from where you are, Tom, is at our Eastern Agricultural Research Station. So some significant improvements there that helped us improve a feedlot that has state-of-the-art technology, some other barn improvements, and part of that was financed through support from dollars that were generated through pipeline dollars in terms of one of our the private companies that were putting pipelines through different parts of Ohio. So we leveraged some of those dollars to improve facilities at that research station. Another example that's we're excited about is the Ohio 4-H Center is on the 4-H campus, or on the Columbus campus, an important space for meetings and events, and houses our state 4-H staff. The 5th floor had been shelled out when we first built that building, and through support from Nationwide, we were able to finish the 5th floor of that building into office meeting space. And it will house a unit for our college that's going to help us focus on public-private partnerships and moving things ahead as a college.
Great. Well, I know that what I've seen evidence of on Columbus campus, certainly great improvements and making the most of what we currently have, and look forward to more of those coming about. So the Watermen Farm is part of the Columbus campus, and it's on a very well-traveled thoroughfare, Lane Avenue, and lots of work going into the future of Waterman. And maybe you want to highlight some of the planning effort that is going in, and then what is coming even as we speak in terms of actual changes at Watermen Farm, Graham.
So Waterman has been a focus of my work over the last 6 or 8 months. I helped co-chair a task force with the chair of our Department of Animal Sciences, Dr. John Foltz, on the future of Waterman. And so we pulled together a task force, did some extensive efforts with gathering stakeholder input, including students, faculty, staff, and stakeholders. But that asset that you're talking about, 261 acres on the Columbus campus in the 14th largest city in the U.S. is pretty special. And we wanted to spend some time thinking about where we go with the future of that special piece of property. It's a very valuable piece of property. If you're a developer, you could have eyes on that for things like strip malls or office buildings. And we think it's a very important asset for our college and for Ohio State as a learning laboratory. So we're working hard to position it as a critical asset and something that's so valuable that we need to keep it as a living learning laboratory. So I think Tom had situated there, right off Interstate 315 on the Columbus campus, and I'd mentioned 261 acres. It's a property with a diverse array of natural features, which is another thing that's special about it. So it has both. It has a woodlot, a 20-acre woodlot. It has streams running through it. It has tillable land that we can use for growing crops. We're doing garden-based programming. Currently has a dairy on it. Also, we have a 100-cow Jersey herd dairy on the property. So it's used currently for a lot of different things, and we think that we can do more with it. And I'll talk some about sort of the vision that task force identified and some of the things that we're thinking we can do even more of as we move into the future at Waterman.
Right. Well, it's certainly prime real estate, as you have alluded to, and it's certainly one that from the perspective of the number of cars that pass by is very visible and has the opportunity to kind of lift our college's presence in that part of the city and yet serve all these purposes that you've talked about. I think even when you touched on gardens, I think students have maintained local foods production there and been able to take advantage of a certain part of that property.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll mention a few examples of things that are currently happening there like that, and then I can dive into just briefly sharing sort of where the vision and things where we're headed for the future of that property. So, a couple specific examples of things that are happening there today, or have happened in the last year. Today might not be a good example with as rainy and snowy as it is in Ohio. But some exciting things that are going on there include a student farm. So you'd mentioned there is a student-run farm that's a student club at Ohio State. Those students are mostly students that have had no exposure to agriculture. So as I talked with them before, they may be sociology majors. Many of them are from large cities, but they're interested in learning about agriculture. They have a CSA as part of their farm and sell produce through a CSA. So that's a neat way to get college students exposed to agriculture that might not have been otherwise. Another example, we have a turf grass research and education facility at Waterman. And so you may be aware that there's a new soccer club going in Cincinnati. And the soccer stadium there has turf that's being installed by some of our alumni of our college and affiliated with the Motts Group. And the turf there is a special kind of turf. It's a hybrid. It's part artificial and part real grass. And at Waterman, we have graduate students that are doing research on that type of turf and learning more about how it works and how they can make it better. And so neat example of something that connects both work in Columbus at Waterman with some real world applications in Ohio being done by Ohio State alumni. Last example I'll mention is I'd mentioned we have a Jersey dairy cow herd at Waterman and had an opportunity this fall to host a group from the World Jersey Conference. So these were people from all over the world that came to the U.S. on a tour to learn about the dairy industry. And we got to host them at Ohio State in Columbus at our dairy. And so it was really neat. I even got to talk to some farmers from the Isle of Jersey, which is where the Jersey cow originated. But just a neat opportunity to bring them to Ohio State, learn from them. They can learn from what we're doing and share like that.
Excellent. Well, those are certainly taking place. I think there's a couple of other facilities underway. At least you might want to touch on the Franklin County Extension Office facility that is under construction. And I think that come back to that word partnership, I think it would be worth mentioning.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that task force had created this vision for the future of Waterman, and I'll go back to the grand challenges we talked about earlier. So we're also describing it as a grand challenges focused facility, a place in a small way that we can do work around those grand challenges that you and I talked about earlier. We also think it can be a real center to inform and educate a broader audience. So both Ohio State students, K-12 students, and really people across the lifespan. About agriculture, natural resources, and the environment. And so we think in the future we need to do more with engaging students in a bigger and better way, focusing on research that also is uniquely positioned to be able to educate. So this idea of research on display, much like you see when you go to some modern museums where there may be research happening there behind the scenes, that's behind glass, or that's visible and part of learning about what's happening with that industry. public engagement in general, and then I think also showcasing the breadth of Ohio agriculture. We have a really diverse array of agriculture in Ohio, and being able to showcase that in a small way there is an important part of where we're headed with that facility. So to do that, some buildings and facilities are an important part of getting there, we think. One of those that you just mentioned, Tom, is the Coons Brundage Franklin County Extension Building. So we have extension offices in every county in Ohio. Construction is underway on a $5 million facility to house the extension staff for Franklin County and have really state-of-the-art learning spaces there. It will include a teaching kitchen for some of the nutrition education programming. And so it will bring that whole team to Waterman and really help anchor our outreach efforts at Waterman. That entire $5 million facility was a gift from a single donor, Patricia Brundage, who is passionate about our work with Extension and passionate about 4-H and wanted to help support what we do by providing that facility for our faculty, staff, and stakeholders.
Certainly exciting to see that developing, and even as you described some of the how it fits into the grand challenge and the rural-urban interface, having that office there and bringing urban dwellers and young people onto Watermen Farm. Here's food production all the way through the test kitchen. Here's what we cooked, and this is where some of that is sourced from. I think just right in front of us, certainly a great example.
Yeah, and I think that array that you're talking about is exactly right, that it might be somebody doing backyard gardening. It might be somebody wanting to get started in a small way in farming. And we know that that's certainly an issue with our aging population of farmers and a need to bring new people into agriculture, that there are ways that we can provide some of that start for them, looking at things like even farm incubator type programs that our extension staff may lead there. So you're right, a wide array of ways that people might engage.
Absolutely.
If you want, I can
go ahead.
Mention a couple other examples of facilities that are in the pipeline there. Mm-hmm. And those include a very large greenhouse complex. We're calling it a controlled environment food production research complex. So a very large greenhouse complex that mimics the kind of greenhouses that are going in Ohio. If some of the expansion plans in Ohio are realized, Ohio may soon be the second largest indoor food production state next to California. And so this facility is being designed in a way that we can help support that industry and the work that they do. And so that's another one of the facilities that we think will help be an important part of research and work that we do at Waterman. Mm-hmm. The second is we want to do a better job with bringing students and animals together for learning experiences. We currently have barn facilities near the OSU airport, which is about 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes to get there from the Columbus campus for learning opportunities for students. So we're going to build a new multi-species animal learning center that will really improve our ability to work with students and stakeholders and animals and learning experiences together right there on the Columbus campus. Will include a wide array of animals: horses, swine, poultry, beef and sheep, and small ruminants, and that's another important part of this vision and where we're headed for Waterman.
Excellent. Well, I think that's designed with efficiency in mind as well, that rather than back in my days, a long time ago as a student at Ohio State, there were farm animals right across from the classroom buildings, and across the street where the Schottenstein Center, there were still cows grazing over there. So it was all, and it was year round, and they had to be maintained. I think one of the concepts is that the animals can be brought in and then taken back to their permanent homes elsewhere in facilities as the need arises. So I think it's going to be a very efficient way of introducing students and research projects and all that you've talked about in a very efficient way as we rotate species and specific purposes and projects in and out of that facility. Graham, we are getting down to about the 1 minute mark, and so I just offer you the last word on anything you want to add in terms of that vision beyond what you shared for Waterman, or anything just wrapping up about the current infrastructure projects and operations at the college.
Well, I think as in wrapping up sort of our vision from Waterman, I will say that we think there's incredible opportunity there for it to be a showcase and hub of experiential learning around all the areas that our college is involved in. So food, agricultural, and environmental sciences. We hope it's a place where people can come together and connect to trusted information. There's a lot of divisive issues today around agriculture, and an important place to come together and learn and talk about important issues. I will also mention our website is very short. It's waterman.osu.edu. So if the listeners want to hear more about or learn more about Waterman, waterman.osu.edu is our website. Much of the information I talked about today and more is available there, including a drone video that you can watch and learn about the whole property there if you like to watch videos. And Columbus Dispatch did a nice video for us. So I think that's a good way to wrap up with the vision and some opportunities to learn more. I thank you. I appreciate the time to join you and talk with you today about this, Tom.
All right. Well, thank you, Graham. The pleasure is ours. Again, Graham Cochran, the Associate Dean for Operations, the College of Food, Ag, Environmental Science, has been our guest today. We certainly have enjoyed hearing about the work that Graham is leading in terms of infrastructure improvements and refreshment across the state. Join us next time for another South Center's Chat.